So I probably talked about this before. I know I have to you. I don't know much about cars. I'm not a mechanical. I don't know anything about how to fix cars, but I've always been fascinated with cars, which has obviously led me into the YouTube car world. And for anyone out there who is curious, there's a great YouTube car world out there. And it's fascinating. And there's this show. There's a show called, not on YouTube. There's a show called Top Gear. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yes.
It was like a British show. It's just really entertaining. They did did ridiculous things. They did this thing called a Star in the Reasonably Priced Car, where they race around, and it's a really great show where they just like kind of review cars, show you cars, do these like mini series about one car, whatever. It's really interesting. And they also do crazy like, here's $5,000 and buy a minivan to take on a road trip, whatever. And then they go on a road trip. It's just interesting, kind of fun stuff.
I've seen a little bit of it, yeah.
I probably watched, it was on Netflix a decade ago, and I watched 15 seasons or what. It's something crazy, right? I love the show. But there is a YouTube version starring 3 of YouTube's finest car people, right? And it's not YouTube's car people like who buy these crazy, they do, who buy these like super exotic, expensive cars. While they do that, it's people who buy really terrible examples of really interesting cars. So like basically they look around and they think, I'm not going to pay $500,000 for a $500,000 car. I'm going to find one that's got a salvage title that maybe got fixed a couple times. It probably doesn't work very well, but like I can still drive around and have for a while kind of thing. It's really kind of fascinating. And these 3 guys, they make this show called Car Trek, and they just do the same kind of thing as a Top Gear, but like on YouTube, and like these characters, like not characters, but like these personalities that I've already liked do the show that I already like. It's great. I love it. But one of the guys who does that on there, he has a YouTube channel named Hoovy's Garage. His name's Tyler. And Tyler Hoover, I believe is his name.
Yes.
And Hoovy's Garage, have you ever heard of him?
No.
He owns like, I don't know, 30 or something, 30 plus cars probably. And except for him, what's interesting is, and I believe in the car world, like a really terrible vehicle, like almost like a lemon.
Yes.
Some people refer to them as like hoopties.
Hoopties, yeah. I knew about a lemon, but I have not heard of.
And maybe, I don't know. But anyway, so he has a bunch of just like ridiculous cars, right? And so he has a bunch of interesting cars, but also a large fair share of what you might call hoopties, right? Hoovy's hoopties. Like all kinds of crazy cars. Like he'll just buy, like he's the kind of guy who will go out and buy like a 1990s Volvo mom's soccer car, right? And like for some reason, like he liked it, or it was cheap, or he thought it was whatever. Like he just has all kinds of stuff like this, and he does have a Lamborghini and a Ferrari and a Rolls Royce and all this stuff, right? And sometimes they'll purposely buy like the most depreciated car ever. Like this car was $375,000 new, but I just bought a 15-year-old one for $7,000, whatever, right? Something like that.
This sounds like a video game I'm playing right now.
Okay,
I'm playing this game called Pacific Drive, and it takes place in like the Pacific Northwest. You're in this kind of like mystical version of that area called the Olympic Exclusion Zone. But basically you're driving a beat up like 80s station wagon, and you're trying to like not have magical things destroy your car.
That's hilarious.
And like it's a survival game, so I'm trying to repair it, and you start so like I will be driving down the road, and then I need to pull over and get out of the car and do something, and then I'll forget to put the car in park, and then the car will just start like rolling away.
That's hilarious.
I have no rear bumper yet. I have to like craft a bumper. So as you're talking about these like Hoovy's hoopties, I think I've basically been playing a video game driving one of them.
That's hilarious. And that's even more perfect, because what I want to talk to you specifically about today is a specific one of these vehicles that Hoovy's Garage has purchased or had. This has been a while now, but he bought a 1983 Chrysler LeBaron station wagon. And it's like exactly what you would think. Like think like Home Alone, like weird hood ornament, fake wood side panels, cloth roof, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And like he bought it because it's just like, it's just such a fascinating car, whatever, right? He probably remembered as a kid. I honestly can't remember the reason he bought the car, whatever, right? But he was trying to make it better, and everything just kept going wrong with this car, like it always does. That happens with that stuff, right? And he has this mechanic he uses, and he calls him the Wizard, whatever. It's like you can watch this guy on the internet. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm interested.
But he did this thing where this car, everything kept going wrong, nothing was going right. His 1983 LeBaron, nothing was going right for it. And he just decided, I gotta get rid of this. And so he looked on CarMax. How much will CarMax offer me? It was like $500, and he had paid thousands. He's like, I can't do it. I don't know what to do. So he decided to bury it. He's like, I'm just gonna bury it. And so his mechanic went out and dug, or somebody, I don't even remember, somebody went out and dug a hole, right? And you think a grave 6 feet under. This person dug like a 10-foot hole that you could fit like a bus inside. A huge hole, right? So they put this car in the hole, bury it completely, right? For 1 year. And then in 1 year, they dig up the car. This has happened, okay? And I kid you not, the car comes out, they put it on the ground. It's like completely destroyed. The structure is gone. The roof is gone. He gets in the car and it started.
Oh my gosh.
After being underground for a year. It's like the car didn't work when he put it in the hole.
Right.
But somehow is that crazy
that
or
is.
what? I could not believe it. I was mind blown. This is an old video. This is not a new thing, but I somehow just stumbled upon it. And I just thought that has got to be one of the most fascinating things I've ever heard of.
Welcome to the Factoid Podcast. You didn't ask for it, but we're going to tell you about it anyways. My name's Payton Gessel.
And I'm Chris Humphreys.
Chris, this summer, I took the plunge and watched my first Eurovision Song Contest.
Huh.
Have you heard much about Eurovision? Do you know anything about this?
No.
The best way for me to describe Eurovision is it's like American Idol mixed with the Olympics and with the budget of a Super Bowl halftime show. So it is a singing competition, and several different countries, maybe like 20 to 40 or so in or near Europe, they all send one musical act, and they will write and perform one original song per country. And each country, their fans get to cast votes for their favorite musician. And then those get added to a panel of judges where each country officially like sends delegates and gives their points. And you combine all those points together to decide who is the winner of the Eurovision Song Contest. And kind of like American Idol, almost everyone who wins this thing or is in this never turns out to be like someone important.
Sure.
But you have your Kelly Clarksons.
Right.
So ABBA won Eurovision
Really?
in the 70s. They're probably the most famous
Okay.
ones. Celine Dion won Eurovision maybe in like the 80s or 90s, which I was trying to look her up, I guess, because she sang at the Olympics like a week ago.
Uh-huh.
It was a big like reveal where I think she's from Canada, but I guess she competed for Switzerland. I don't get how that works. But I guess for people that know me, I don't like to watch things more than once, and I need to wait maybe a decade if I want to watch a movie again or something. I watched this 4-hour finals presentation of Eurovision twice in a weekend. Once by myself, and then I told Amy, like, you have to watch this with me or we're going to have nothing to talk about for the next week because it's all I'm going to want to talk to you about. So we skipped some of the times when they're stalling for time and like when they're waiting for votes to come in or whatever. But like, you know, it was just so well done. And I think one of the big things that stood out to me was the difference between the kind of songs you get on American Idol versus Eurovision.
Sure.
When I think about American Idol, and I don't watch it I haven't watched it in like 15 to 20 years.
Sure.
But I imagine like Stevie Wonder covers basically.
Right.
Like, not that that's bad, but it's just not really exactly my thing.
Right.
In Eurovision, everything is kind of like Eurodance. Like you have a lot of like house music almost in a way, and there are some slow love songs too, but overall everything is pretty fast. And you get these songs that I don't know if they're supposed to be judging them on their singing quality or if it's just like, is the song good? I am still unsure because like there was one act from, I think it was Finland, by the musician named Windows 95 Man.
Nice.
He's wearing a shirt with the blurred out Windows 95 logo
That's
on it.
hilarious.
And he's not wearing pants. And throughout the whole song, like the camera angles are just in the right way where they're blocking the bottom half of his body, and then eventually like a pair of jorts gets like lowered from the ceiling that he puts on. Like,
so it's like part of the show.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, like it is like the cinematography of this is so unreal, and I think it was really like exemplified by what I would say my favorite act was from a duet from Ukraine.
Okay.
And they ended up finishing maybe in third or fourth place out of the top 25. So they did very well. And it's like this epic song about Mother Teresa, and it ends in a rap. And like the singer in the duet, she's like walking up this fake cliff, and there's an LED floor that has like water rushing all around her. She's wearing this crazy outfit that has like armor on the shoulder, and she's singing very well throughout all of this. And like I'm watching this performance, and I totally understand why everyone sides with Ukraine in the war against Russia, because it's like Ukraine feels like an experiment in like, what if Russia was cool and like not the way that they kind of are, basically. And Russia is banned currently from Eurovision.
Oh, really?
Until further notice because of the war.
Oh, okay, sure.
But if they do compete in the future, they may have to deal with a new creative limitation in their songwriting, because in the Russian region of Chechnya, all music that is below 80 beats per minute and above 116 beats per minute is now banned.
Really?
Yes. You are, as of June 1st, you are not allowed to have any musical, vocal, or choreographic works that are below 80 and above 116 beats per minute. And the goal is to, as they say from their press release, to conform to the Chechen mentality and sense of rhythm.
That's not that big of a gap.
No, it's not.
That's crazy.
As we've established, I'm still learning a lot more about music, and that's kind of how I came across this, and it's been interesting to me. But I'm not an expert on things like rhythm and beats per minute and tempo. And this episode has really taught me a lot about those sort of things, and I hope I can share just a nugget of information about this with you. But first, Chechnya. Do you know anything about Chechnya?
No, not at all.
So Chechnya, it's kind of like an autonomous region of Russia. It's not like a state. Chechnya and Russia don't like each other. They keep trying to, I think there were 2 wars they fought to try to like secede and become their own country, and they keep failing. But they're in like the southwestern part of Russia in what's called like the North Caucasus Mountains. And this is near like Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Jordan. And a kind of a random aside that I learned is that people from this region, whether it's Chechnya or those other countries, these are Caucasian people. Like that is where the term comes from when like you have to fill out on the government form that says like, I'm Caucasian. We're not Caucasian. These people are the actual Caucasians. But in this Caucasian region, especially in Chechnya, there's a popular style of dance that is called the lezginka.
Okay.
And the lezginka is this dance that is a fancy way of a guy being able to tell a girl that he likes her. And this is usually done at some sort of, it's often at a wedding, just as like an icebreaker. You got all these probably young singles there,
right?
Maybe at a party, but it's more formal settings that you find like the lezginka being danced. And I watched a lot of YouTube videos of these, and they go real hard. It is impressive to watch the dance moves on these people, because I don't know if they're really professionals. Like I think it's like, I want to date someone bad enough, so I'm going to learn how to do this crazy dance to show off to them, and
they like work on it on their own for weeks and weeks.
You have to hope, yes. So like I'm watching a video of like some of these lezginkas, and I basically, a guy was kind of commenting on the beats per minute ban, and he says, wait a second, the lezginka, this lezginka song is 160 beats per minute. And then I saw some other people like arguing that no, it's 80 beats per minute. It's not 160, and it's allowed. And that's when I learned that music tempo isn't objective. Yeah, like as a performer, like have you ran into this? Like, do you know what I'm talking about?
Like whether it's like halftime or double time kind of thing.
Yeah, where you can kind of argue.
You can make both work, really.
Yes. So I had no idea about this, and Amy was trying to explain it to me, and like I knew that there are websites that will tell you about the exact beats per minute of a track, because I know in the DJing world, it's really important to know like a tempo of a
Yes.
song because you have to crossfade from the one to
Right.
the other.
They have to match. Or...
Yes, exactly. So there are like these big tables that you can find online where it's like, here's a dump of 20,000 songs and here's the exact beats per minute that they all are. So as I've been just like learning how to do like music production, I'm doing like cover songs of things, and I found a song that I was trying to do, and like one piece of sheet music called it 80 and one called it 160, kind of like the Lesginka. And like it really threw me off, and I didn't really understand it. So I kind of want to do a test for the listeners at home and for you as well, Chris.
Okay.
Just to help experience this, because I can't play the Lesginka for you. It is a copyrighted song, but just to kind of get you understanding like how it's less of an objective thing, and it's more about how you perceive music. So the test that I want to do is I want to play a metronome at a few different tempi, I think is the correct term, but we're just going to say tempos because that
Sure.
sounds a lot better.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known that was the actual term.
It showed up in a lot of research papers, and I was like, is that really? But that probably is Italian or something.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is I want to start off here just by playing at 80 beats per minute.
Okay.
And I want you to kind of just sway your head at like to the beat that feels natural for you, I guess. So I'm going to start playing here now. Maybe it takes a few times through until you kind of get the feeling. And then we're going to jump up to 160 here in a second. Coming up now. And then just decide kind of like how you want to keep swaying. And then now we're going to 640. So chances are I'm going to guess that when I put that at 640 beats per minute, you were not just like frantically. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And part of that has to do with what I learned is that there is kind of a sweet spot when it comes to beats per minute and tempo that that humans just like want to experience. And when you get outside of that, you still just want to stick to the tempo that is normal for you. And I learned that a lot of this has to do with your heart.
Huh.
So as we all know, the heart rate is not constant. It is, it's changing based on so many factors, a lot of them being biological, some other ones being mental or emotional. If you're in love, like, there's so many things that can change that. So we have to kind of look at heart rate as a range. And even healthy ranges vary a lot from person to person. But I guess if I'm being very broad, like generally an adult's resting heart rate might be between 60 and 100 beats per minute. And then I looked up like a table of like a healthy range for moderate exercise for a 30-year-old would be 95 to 162. And right in the middle of that range is the average tempo of most top 40 pop and dance hits. So Spotify and many other sites have been like they find it interesting categorizing all this stuff and trying to see like what are the popular beats per minute. And there are two significant spikes in tempo that they find. One is around 90 to 100 BPM, and the other is between 120 and 130. And that is the largest spike, which is where, 90 to 100 also happens to be a pretty common walking heart rate. And 120 to 130 is often associated with moderate exercise, maybe dancing.
Wow.
So if we're listening to music and we're trying to determine the tempo, we are more likely to experience the music at a tempo closer to one of these common heartbeat ranges, regardless of how fast or slow the music may actually be. And what I thought was really funny is if it's just a little bit faster than your heart rate, your heart kind of wants to catch up. And some people like theorize that this is why you want to start dancing, where it's like, it's playing at 120, maybe your heart's only at 90 or 100, but it's like your heart kind of
feeling it.
Exactly. And then you start to get into your body parts. So different body parts have different preferred tempos, which explains why like certain genres of music have different dance moves. Where it's like with so like rap music is significantly slower than a lot of these other ones. It ends up being like maybe 90 to 100 or so, and often in like if you go to like a rap concert, you might have people who are doing like kind of a one hand kind of slowly up in the air over their head, and it's a lot more rhythmic and a lot slower. But then like if you're at, I don't know, a rave or something, like, the dance moves are going to be significantly faster, and it's kind of timed. It's a kind of these different, the tempo of the music makes different parts of your body want to do different things. And I read several research papers on this concept called spontaneous motor tempo that explains the tapping of someone's finger, and how the idea of tapping your finger on a table has like a very specific range that most people default to. So Chris, I don't know how well this will pick up in the mic, but I want you to just tap a beat for me on the table here.
Like just a generic, what I would normally
Yes,
tap?
just like tap. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you are tapping at about 122 beats per minute, which definitely falls in the range where I don't have the exact number in front of me, but almost everybody who does this tapping test taps right in that range for some reason. And I guess people say that this is kind of like the resonance of the human body at different, where it's like we all do this because this part of your body just considers this to be the right way. And some people have been referring to this as the 2 hertz human instrument, where because the interval is about a half second between
right. Yeah,
the
2
taps.
times per second. And that's we were just talking about this before, like the default in the DAW that comes up on the metronome is 120.
Yeah, and that has to be, I have to imagine that is just so common.
People just want that.
Yes, so they just give it to them by default. So if you look at the specific styles of Chechen music, other than the lezginka, there's a lot of like folk music, and I would say it is noticeably slower. But I was looking up on some charts of like, looking at these lezginka, looking at non-lezginka Chechen songs, and they do pretty much fall in that 80 to 116 range, with some pretty notable exceptions. Like the Russian national anthem is just a little bit too low in the 70s. Or even like the music in the video where the Chechen cultural minister makes the announcement has music that's like 78 beats per minute.
That's hilarious.
You would think that he would check that and make sure before he puts that out there.
Is there any important music we use? It's not in that window.
Or right. And if you're someone who goes on royalty-free music sites and downloads music like I do for work, they list that info on the page. So it's not like it's hard to find that out. So I guess this kind of brings up the real reason why Chechnya is banning this in the first place. They say it's to like protect their cultural heritage. But like they're not trying to encourage development of this specific type of music. Their government just wants to ban foreign music from the West that makes people want to go and live in other countries, basically, or like corrupts their minds with Western ideals, I assume. But like it's not like they think that they don't think music that's too fast is bad and music that's too slow is bad, which a lot of the articles I would see from like NPR and other big sites that would just say like Chechnya bans music that's too fast and too slow. But like that kind of buries the lead, I guess. And the reason they do this though is that if most popular Western music is above 116 beats per minute, it's a pretty easy way to just legislate a way that makes almost all of this type of music just illegal by default. And, without having to just say all non-Chechen music is banned. And they're like I mentioned, something like rap is probably still immune to this. It does fall into that range. There are some other genres that you can find songs that are in 80 to 116. It's not uncommon. But since we learned that tempo is something that has to be experienced, the cultural minister of Chechnya can just say he experiences it at half time or double time and can pretty much just ban anything he wants, which is the ultimate goal, sadly, of this. So, it's crazy that it does come down to just like one guy's opinion.
Yeah.
Because if you told me about like, if I was younger, that there's a guy called like the cultural minister, I imagine him being some like fun guy that just gets to like eat cool food, local food, when really it's all about like, what can I keep out instead of what can I bring in? So I thought it'd be fun for our listeners if they want to just try to be the Chechen cultural minister for a day. So I'm going to put one of the lezginka tracks in the show notes as a link. And I guess you just tell me what beats per minute you think that you're experiencing it at. Is it 80? Is it 160? Does it fall in the range? Does it get banned? I guess, you get to be the judge.
Payton, you're a well-traveled guy.
I try.
You're much more well-traveled than I am. How many places have you been to the ocean at?
Okay. Do you count any sort of, like, would you count like the Gulf of Mexico? Does that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope so, because it's the only place I've ever been to the ocean.
Okay. So then, yeah. So not like, so Great Lakes obviously out then.
Right.
So I have been to the Pacific, like out in California. I've been to the Atlantic Ocean. I've been to the Gulf of Mexico. I've been to the Mediterranean, and then like the, I guess, the other side of the Atlantic, I guess.
So like pretty much like 6 times the places I've been.
but not the. Have you heard people talk about the Southern Ocean, where it's like some people argue there's a 5th ocean?
No.
Like if the Arctic Ocean gets to be a thing, that the Antarctic, and I think some scientists do actually consider it to be our 5th ocean.
Well, I feel like when I was growing up, when you're learning all the geography, I feel like I heard of the Antarctic Ocean. Like, I feel like that's a term I've heard before. I don't know.
The weird thing is that oceans don't really have borders.
That's the thing. It's just a big puddle, like a huge one. It's all connected. That's what's kind of crazy about it, is you can get to all of it from any of it.
Oh, absolutely.
If you decide to.
Yes.
It's not easy to, but you can do that. Like I said, I've only been to the Gulf of Mexico. I've been to Gulf Shores, Alabama, multiple times. That's kind of our vacation spot of choice. But that's the only time I've ever been to the ocean. And it wasn't until I was like in my 20s that I saw the ocean for the first time. But the very first thing, the immediate thought I had in my head when I got to the ocean for the first time was, and this is just the Gulf of Mexico, was, this thing's huge.
Yeah.
It's just so like vast. Like everywhere you look, like for as far as the eye can see from one way to the other, it's just ocean. The further you go out, the more that seems true, right? You get out to where you can't see and I've never even been there, but you go out far enough where you can't even see the coast that you just came from, and you're suddenly surrounded by just water.
Yeah.
Miles and miles, as far as the eye can see, of water. It's huge. I guess another question for you. You've been to the ocean. Have you ever been on a boat? And this can be like any type of boat.
Yeah. I've been on, I think we did like a dolphin watching when one time in Florida 15 years ago. I've been on fewer boats. Would you count like a ferry? Like if
Sure, yeah. I think so.
Yeah. So we did like a ferry out in Seattle area. There's a ferry that runs from Seattle to Bainbridge Island. It basically like cuts you across the Olympic Peninsula and saves a lot of time. So yeah, like I'm not on boats a ton, but a little bit.
Okay. So I'm not either. I'm not on a boat a ton. I've been on ski boats and john boats and kayaks and canoes and whatever. I've been on all that kind of stuff. Bass boats, whatever. I've been on a dolphin cruise or whatever, like that kind of thing too. And it's super cool. I enjoy that. But I would not call myself a boat person. And something
same.
I've never, ever been on is a sailboat. You ever been on a sailboat?
No.
I think I've always kind of been fascinated by it.
Yeah.
It seems like an inefficient way to travel to me, but it's like it seems like a fax machine.
Yes.
Like, why does that still exist? You know what I'm saying? That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
But it's always been interesting to me, to say the least. And I had a professor in college who was very interested. It was like a hobby of his. He was a sailor. He was a sailor. Sailor? A sailor.
I guess so.
And so he talked about that a lot, just in his, just like illustrations he would have or whatever. He talked about sailing, and he actually took out 2 of my friends. He took them on his boat sailing. So I heard their story about going sailing with him. So it's pretty interesting. But there's something kind of interesting about how you just harness the power of the wind to move your boat, right? And like what's crazy about it is like there doesn't have to be much wind at all for you to be moving very fast. And another thing that's crazy is like you can figure out through the power of these sails. And again, I don't know the science behind sailing. Like, I don't even know what kind of science, if it's aerodynamics or physics. I don't know what it is, right?
Yeah.
But like you can sail into the wind. Is that crazy or what?
Yeah, and
like,
it doesn't just like push you back.
Yeah, like you can somehow figure out how to sail into the wind, which is crazy to me because again, you would think you put up a big piece of material in the sky and it's going to blow you the way it's going to blow you.
Yeah.
But you like have so much power over that. And there's a lot of things I don't understand about it, but I've kind of always been fascinated by it. You and all our listeners know me by now. You know that I like an inspiring story. of a perfectly normal, average person doing something extraordinary. I
Yes.
like an inspiring story of accomplishment. And I have one of those for you today. There's a guy named Luke Harley who grew up in Boston, and I want to tell you a little bit more about him. He actually goes online by the name Sailing Songbird. Have you ever heard of him?
No, I have not.
So the Sailing Songbird, starting not long ago, had the plan and is executing the plan of circumnavigating the globe solo on a 27-foot sailboat.
Oh my gosh.
And it gets more interesting, okay? Because Luke when he was 15 years old, he moved to Oregon. He's from Boston, but he moved to Oregon. He'd never been really interested in the ocean or anything like that. In fact, when he completed high school out in Oregon, he studied music. And that's what he did. And he had big aspirations of like leading large groups like choirs, orchestra, show, like put on a big show that with lots of people. And that was kind of his thing. That was what he wanted to do. He wanted to have multiple generations in the same show. He wanted it to be this thing that's never before seen. He had big aspirations, big dreams of becoming this big person in music on the West Coast. But as soon as he graduated and as soon as he started to live into that dream, COVID happened, which meant that music halls, stages, any large gathering of people just couldn't happen, just didn't happen. There was no future in sight where it would happen. Isn't that crazy to think about? Like, I remember so clearly, I'm sure all of us do, like when it happened and you're like, oh, everything will be back in a week. And then a week happens, you're like, everything will be back next week. And then it's like, maybe the world will never be back. You know what I'm saying?
And I was on the opposite end of this in a lot of ways, where instead of having like public music performance situation where it's like, I can't do this, everyone wanted a video because they couldn't do stuff.
Yeah, you were in the perfect industry for that, right? Big dreams in the video industry was probably a lot easier to handle then. But
yes.
In fact, Kirsten and I we didn't have tickets, but we had big plans of going to see a Broadway play in New York.
Oh man!
And then COVID hit, and they stopped it, and I was upset by that because we wanted to see the specific show, the specific person in it, whatever. But like that's the thing. And when that happened, and the longer it happened, the longer it went, the more it seemed like there was no future for any of that in sight, that it wasn't going to come back. And if it ever did, it wouldn't be the same.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so his dreams weren't necessarily crushed, but he saw the reality of them going away. And so eventually he just decided, you know what, I'm going to apply for a job in my field. And he started applying for jobs. He eventually applied to be a public school music teacher and got accepted. He was a music teacher for a public school. There's a specific point in his life at this time where he says that his dreams changed. They moved from what he thought before to what he was going to think in the future. He started his job at this school, and in the winter, when he left his house, it was dark. His classroom had no windows, and when he left school at night, it was dark. So he would go to school in the dark, he would go to a classroom that had no natural light, and he would leave in the dark. And it kind of weighed down on him like it would anyone.
Yeah.
Right? Vitamin D deficiency is a real thing. It happens all the time, especially in a place like Ohio where there's not a whole lot of sun in the wintertime.
Yep.
It happens, right?
Yeah. I got like dangerously low on my vitamin D several years ago. And it's because I was working in like an area with no lights.
Right.
And it was like my first apartment on my own. And for those of you who get your vitamin D3 levels checked, I think I dropped down to 7.
Whoa.
And it was the point where like I thought I must have depression or something.
Sure.
And I went to the doctor and they're like, no, you just desperately need vitamin D.
That's right.
So now I'm up in like the 40s and 50s. Don't worry, guys, I'm good now.
Because 40 is 40 like what they want it to be?
30 and below is deficient.
I think mine was like 19 or 20 when I got it checked in the wintertime. And they're like, just, it's winter, it's not uncommon, just take some vitamin D or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's common, right? But that's what he was experiencing, was this time period where he just kind of hated it, right? It kind of weighed on him, the fact that it was just dark and dingy and everything. There was no light in his life. He wanted light, and he wanted sunshine, and he wanted air. And he got it. In 2023, when the school year started, he actually got COVID himself. And it was a mild case, but still, it was the time, 2023, apparently, in this part of the world, still required quarantining. And so he basically just spent his entire quarantine outside in the sun, in the air, in the breeze, walking around outside, staying away from people, but just enjoying life as much as he could. And it was then that he realized that he needed a change and that his career that he currently worked in was just going to be a means to an end. And he says that the decision to sail around the world was in that time period a split-second decision. And now, here he is, sailing around the world. How do you go from being a teacher who, get this, has never sailed before, didn't know anything about it?
Wow, I assumed this was at least a hobby.
No, it was not a hobby. How do you go from being someone who doesn't have any interest in it, had never done it before, to being someone who alone sails the open seas for literally thousands and thousands of miles for months at a time? Well, honestly, the answer is YouTube. For Luke, anyway, for sailing Songbird, the literal answer is YouTube. He just decided during all this stuff, he got really into the water, really into boating and all these outdoor activities, sailing being part of it. He started following all types of content creators who made boating content and sailing content and whatever. And so he did start learning about it, but he didn't know anything about it up to that point. In fact, it wasn't until 2 years ago that he had ever even been on a sailboat. And then, again, just a few months ago, probably it's been about a year ago now, he bought his very own 27-foot Vancouver sailing yacht, and he had no idea what he was doing. He didn't know how to sail. He didn't know how to fix it, and this one needed fixed. But it was a project for him, and so he bought it for like $13,000. He's a teacher, right? He didn't have much money. He did a bunch of research on how can I stay within my budget. He talked to a bunch of people and said, look, I want to sail around the world. What can I buy on a teacher's budget? What can I do, right? And he talked to enough people, and they said, and they led him a certain way, and he found this boat. And it actually was just 30 minutes away from his house. He found it on Facebook Marketplace. He paid $13,000 for it, and he put another $20,000 into it in renovations. And when he bought it, he thought, I can fix this thing up in a week, and I'll be ready to go. It took him 7 months to fix it, but it became like a passion project where he would work on every free moment he had of every day. He would just work from morning till night, like doing all the things you have to do, and it kind of became like his life. It was his baby. It was his thing.
Do you think they make lifts for boat? Like, how do you do work on the underside of a boat?
I think most of his work wasn't on the underside. I think it was in relatively. They do. I think they make things that hold them up in the air, basically.
Okay.
And I know they do because there's like there's like things like called dry docking for a boat, and it's like, have you ever seen like those huge like. They'll store them like up in the air with boats underneath them. Have you ever seen that?
No. So,
yeah.
Okay.
So like they have boat lifts basically, right? So there's ways to get under it. But I don't know all the work that he put into it, but he put 7 months of work into it, $20,000, and he got it into tip-top shape. 7 months later, which happens to be October 7th, 2023, so not long ago, Luke set sail from Seattle. And his first stop was going to be in La Paz, which is in Mexico.
Yeah.
And he said that on his first leg of travel, and again, just keep in mind who this guy is and everything he's gone through to get here, right? He doesn't know that much about it. This is kind of his first go at it all. In his first leg of travel, it took him 6 weeks to get there. And he did actually have a sailor mate for this first leg of travel. He found a guy on Facebook, and he went through interviews with people and vetted people and he picked this one guy, right?
Looking for one matey.
Exactly. And he had a guy, right? He had a friend. He had a person with him. But it took him 6 weeks. And during the longest stretch of that 6-week trip, there was a big storm. He found himself on the edge of a hurricane. For 7 days, there was 30 to 35-foot waves that he was sailing in.
No.
They're in a 27-foot boat, sailboat, with waves that are longer than if their boat was standing on its end. It's insane. Like, I can't even imagine that. I've never experienced anything like that.
Yeah. Like
I've only been on lakes a few times, and when they are, it's like the wake of a boat is the biggest wave you see.
Exactly.
You know?
How bad are you with like car sickness and things like that?
Not terrible, but it's possible for me to get car sick.
Same here. And I was with my dad a couple weeks ago. We were driving down like in the middle of nowhere, a bunch of twists and turns and things. And I mean, I got like, fairly bad car sickness. Like, I was worried I was going to vomit, and I ended up being fine, like recovered, and stuff. But yeah, nothing compared to 35-foot waves.
That's right. Seriously, it's terrifying to even imagine that that's possible, let alone being out there on a boat with
just
no
your first
one.
mate.
Exactly. Like, I often think, like, when I go on a road trip, what if my car breaks down? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And realistically, I have rental car coverage for my insurance. Like, if my car breaks down, worst case scenario, I pull it off the side of the road, someone tows it, we get a rental car, and we go the rest of the way.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, it's not the end of the world. But imagine your boat breaks down 1,000 miles away from land, and like, what do you do? Like, I don't even know what you do. I have no clue what you do. I don't think there's just tons of people. You're not going to be passing by tons of people while you're out there. You know what I mean? So
SOS. That's why they have
exactly. But his story is like kind of inspiring, and seemingly he's becoming a great sailor, experiencing more in his time right now than probably most sailors will ever experience. I don't know. I don't know how I don't know how super common it is to try to like go across the Atlantic Ocean. I don't know, like in a solo set. I don't know if that's common. I don't think it is, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
I think I looked up, I think there's been like in the 100 something people who have circumnavigated the globe solo.
Right.
Which is like obviously not no one, but it is a very small amount of people. So you don't just run across people who do this every day.
What I'm curious about is if he left from Seattle, how is he going to get through the U.S. on the boat?
I'm assuming almost. I don't know because I didn't look into it, but I almost think that he might have went like through the Panama Canal or something.
Yes, because that was my guess. It's like there's only so many spots in the world where it's easy to like make the full lap, and I didn't know like what the rules are with circumnavigation. If it's like you go from one end of the country to the next.
And to be fair, he's not. His goal right now is just to get across the Atlantic.
Okay.
So he's not like just doing a huge loop first things first. He's basically he's kind of just dedicated his life to a life of travel.
Sure.
He wants to be out there for years and years, and he wants to eventually have traveled, have circumnavigated. I don't think and maybe someday it'll be like I'm going to do it all at once. I don't know. Yes. But it's not necessarily, I don't think that's necessarily his goal at this point.
Yes. Baby steps.
Exactly. Just baby steps. Just little tiny steps.
Just a little 6-week trip down to
Little
Mexico.
6-week trip to Mexico, little month-long trip, 2,000 miles away. It's crazy. And you can watch, like, I recommend, actually, check this guy out online. He's on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and whatever. And he'll just be like, day 43 of sailing the open seas solo on my boat. And, like, he'll be like, here we are. And he fishes with, like, he spear fishes, catches his own food. And like, he'll be like, here we are, hundreds of miles from anybody, and then he'll show there's like orcas swimming by him or like crazy stuff like that. I mean, it's like pretty amazing the stuff that he has seen. It's pretty cool. But there's so much more to this guy that I could ever really tell you. But I was inspired by him. He inspired me to dream big. Am I going to become a solo sailor?
Yes.
No. But I truly believe that anyone can do more than anyone thinks they could with just a little bit of inspiration, a little confidence, a lot of research, and the courage to just do something you're pretty sure you can do, but won't know until you try.
Thank you for listening to the Factoid Podcast. Yeah, as always, if you have a factoid that you want to share with us, just send us an email at whatsyours@factoidpodcast.com.
We have a special surprise, a fun one, if you will, for you guys coming up next time. So make sure that you have notifications turned on whatever your podcast app is, so that right when that episode comes out, you can check it out. It's going to be fun.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.